I'm Max Meyer, Sports Illustrated's gambling producer, and alongside me is Scott Gramling, our savant
I
of
don't know
sports
about that.
betting. And we are here with our top 5 bets for Week 6's NFL action. Last week we went 2-3, and so we're hoping to improve upon that. But we felt we got a little unlucky with that 2-3. But we're going to start with our first bet, and the lines, there are a lot of short lines this week.
There are.
And when the lines are short, we love home underdogs. And the first one we're going with, Titans +3 against the Ravens. And do you want to go in first?
Yeah, I mean, one of the betting systems that we really pushed last week applied to the Ravens game against the Browns. And we had the Browns. We like the Browns an awful lot, not just getting the 3 points, but also money line. And that system is teams that are outscoring opponents by 10 or more points per game. When coming off back-to-back games of allowing 14 points or fewer, we're 2-14 against the spread since the start of 2014. Well, now it's 2-15 against the spread, with the Ravens losing that game, not only just not covering,
Browns,
losing that game to the Browns. And the same thing applies here, where the Ravens are still outscoring opponents by double digits. They're coming off what's actually 3 straight games of allowing 14 or fewer points. And what you have here is another situation where the Titans, to me, offer significant amount of value. I think you could even make a case that the Titans at home could be favored in this game, but certainly taking the 3 points, I think, is there's a lot of value in that.
No, I'm with you. And I think, obviously, the public's going to overreact to the Titans losing to the Bills last week. But the and that was in Buffalo. The Titans are a much better home team than they are on the road, and they've won 12 of their last 14 at home. Marcus Mariota's home splits are really drastic from his road splits this season, and I just think a couple advantages. This is their Ravens' 3rd straight road game, and that's just a bunch of travel. And since 2000, teams that are playing their 3rd straight road game have won 35% of games straight up and are only 44% against the spread. And then another advantage is that the Titans defensive coordinator, Dean Pease, he was the Ravens defensive coordinator the previous 6 seasons before coming to Tennessee this offseason. And so he knows this defense inside and out. He can feed Mike Vrabel and offensive coordinator Matt LaFleur the inside info about this Ravens defense, and I think that's going to be a big advantage.
We saw what happened with that, Matt Patricia and the Lions going against the Patriots,
Exactly,
right? And I'm not saying, sample size of 1, but I think there is a lot of logic to that. And you're right with the Tennessee being a much better home team than a road team. They've also been pretty solid coming off a loss, 8-2 against the spread, coming off a straight-up loss since the start of 2016. Max gave you the numbers of them at home, straight up, and against the spread, 11-4-1, going back the past 2 calendar years in home games. So, yeah, I like the Titans an awful lot here.
And just one stat to show Mariota's home and road splits: 99.4 passer rating at home, 52.6 passer rating on the road. So really, really drastic stuff.
Yeah.
And then another game that you love based off your betting system that you were talking before, and this is a hold your nose pick. We are going Dolphins at home +3.5 against the Bears.
Yeah, look, again, this is one of my favorite betting systems because it shows how teams can be overvalued. And I feel like in this spot here, the Dolphins were not nearly as good as their 3-0 record going into New England. Yeah. Patriots were a team I liked. I wrote it up on SI.com. It was part of the MMQB gambling show, laying only 6.5 points, which kind of seems absurd even just a couple of weeks later. But, that's a tough spot for any team, tough spot for the Dolphins there. And another tough spot was going on the road and playing against Cincinnati. And, they were in that game for a while.
They should have covered that game.
Well, what about Tunsil getting injured in that
true.
game? And that's a big part of that against a tough front seven.
Yeah, so Dolphins star tackle Laramie Tunsil got injured, and after he got injured, that's when the Bengals defensive front struck against Ryan Tannehill. And both times on the fumble return for a touchdown, interception return for a touchdown, there was pressure coming from Tunsil's side after he left from a concussion. Yeah. And he still hasn't been cleared from concussion protocol yet, but he's been limited in practice, and he's trending toward playing on Sunday. And he's a big boost for that Dolphins offensive line, and he'll be needed, especially against a scary Bears defensive front led by Khalil Mack.
Yeah, absolutely. I know the Bears are coming off a bye. Past 4 years, Bears coming off a bye, 0-4 straight up. 0-4 against the spread. They've been outscored by 11.5 points per game in those 4 games. Actually, 2 of those games have been on the road. They've been outscored 33.5 points per game in those 2 games. I know a small sample size, but it's worth mentioning. And I know they have a new head coach now. Coach Nagy was the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, and last season the Chiefs coming off that bye lost that 12-9 horrible game against the Giants, a Giants team that was worse than any other team in the NFL besides the Browns. So
that was on that Roger Lewis 4th down catch for gross. The pass interference. It was so brutal.
Disgusting game.
But I'm not sold on Mitch Trubisky, and we've highlighted this before, that Trubisky is amazing in the first quarter with game script, because that's when Matt Nagy is controlling the play calling and he's making it really easy for Trubisky. But he's been, granted, the last game they played, they absolutely destroyed the Bucs, who have possibly the worst pass defense in the league. But game before that, he struggled against the Cardinals, and it's been a trend this entire season. And then his safety blanket, Allen Robinson, he's going to be covered by Xavier Howard, who is one of the best cornerbacks in the league. So I can definitely see Trubisky struggling. And I just think that 3.5 points is a lot for what I think will be a low-scoring game.
Oh, absolutely. And look, Trubisky, 6 touchdown passes against the Buccaneers. I'm kind of throwing that one out the window, and not just for the sake of making this pick. You can't read anything into that, right? That's a Bucs team that gave up in that game at halftime. They were coming off a Monday night game that they lost tough one against the Steelers. Fitzpatrick with the revolving door was on the way out, and Jameis Winston's on the way in. They packed it in at halftime going into a bye, and you do see sometimes with teams, I know mostly you want to focus on coming out of a bye, but there is some stuff going into a bye as well that you can handicap with. I just think that is an aberration of a game, and because of the outcome of it, the Bears are being completely overvalued here. I think if that game ends up being 27-10 or something like that instead of 48 points, then I think we're looking at a line here that's close to pick 'em. And instead, you're getting 3 and the hook.
Yeah, no, the Bears actually opened as 1-point favorite, then were quickly bet up, and I think it's an absolute gift that we're getting the hook. But just one more point. Dolphins defense against Trubisky. This is the same Dolphins defense that shut down Andy Dalton, and the Bengals had one of the more explosive offenses in the NFL coming to that game, and they only had 1 offensive touchdown against the Dolphins. So I think like 17-14 type of game, and I will gladly take the 3.5.
It does feel like that. It feels like on a higher end, maybe a 20-17. It is in that realm there, and getting 3.5 with that few points being scored is there's just a lot of value in it.
Speaking of points, our next bet, we're going with an over here, and we know over bets are so much fun, but we are going with Seahawks Raiders over 48 points in London. And I just think that Seahawks defense without Earl Thomas and the Raiders defense ever since Khalil Mack was traded to the Bears, these could be two of the bottom 5 defenses in the league. And I think that 48 points is a gift. I think it's just sort of the uncertainty of playing overseas in London. And then I don't think people are really understanding how bad the Seahawks defense was. Like, they only see 33 points given up against the Rams, but it could have been a lot worse.
Absolutely. And as is par for the course here, I have a betting system to back up. This one sounds a little convoluted, but it's teams that are coming off a divisional loss of 7 or fewer points are 18-5 over the total in non-conference games over the last 3 seasons. So I think that there's there's something there. You're right. The Rams could have, if the Rams didn't shoot themselves in the foot a few times, so dropped 45.
Jared Goff was intercepted at the 2-yard line. The Sean McVay, rare conservative decision. He kicked a field goal on 4th and inches instead of going for it. And then they missed an extra point, and that's 12 points on the board, and it would have gone from 33 to 45, and I don't think we would have gotten a total that low. But Goff in that game averaged 10 yards per attempt, and then Phillip Rivers last week against this Raiders defense, he averaged 12.4 yards per attempt. So these are just 2 atrocious pass defenses. And I know what you're thinking, the Seahawks, they love to run the ball, but the Raiders are also giving up over 150 scrimmage yards per game against running backs, and that's 24th in the NFL.
No, absolutely. And I feel like there could be some sloppiness in this game as well, turnovers, that kind of thing. You don't want turnovers happening deep in the red zone. You want to, teams turning the ball over if you're rooting for an over, deep in their own end of the field. I just feel like there is a lot of reason. And, I'm way more comfortable going over the total in non-divisional and non-conference games. It's those games that divisional rivals are a little more familiar with each other, know how to keep each other in check offensively, and actually does that segue kind of nicely into
we can do that. One? I just want one last stat before we segue into that, because that is a great one. Don't be afraid of the London totals. 11 of the past 16 NFL games in London have gone over. Yes. But now we're going with a divisional under, and this one has a high total. I was a little surprised by this, but I guess I understand. We're going under 52.5 points, Bengals Steelers.
Yeah, and you know what? Let me just kind of defend the line a little bit as to why it is that high. Steelers are playing faster. They're running more plays. That's what they wanted to do going into the season. Haley's out as offensive coordinator. I'm not saying he's a slow-down kind of guy, but that's what they ended up doing.
That's what the Browns look like on offense. He's their new offensive coordinator there.
Exactly. That and the Steelers' defense struggling the way it had early in the season. However, holding that Falcons offense to 17 points is impressive. And, when we were talking before this, Max, I thought you were making a good point of the Bengals defense with Burfict back is different. And it is improved. And I think when you look at divisional rivals they play a physical style, it's a grinded out type of game. You look at the Steelers, and on the road, they just haven't been the same team in recent seasons. 14-4 under the total in their last 18 road games against AFC teams, and that goes back to the start of the 2016 season. I just think there are a lot of things pointing toward this game. Look, it's not going to be 9-6, but that's
nice.
That would be nice. That would be nice. Even just going into the fourth quarter, 9-6 would be nice. But 52.5 points is an awful lot of points. I mean, you could be looking at a game that's 28-24. That's a high-scoring game, especially between these two teams. And when you look at the Steelers too, you just go back, and the fact that past 13 road games against AFC teams since the start of 2016, there hasn't been any more than 47 points scored in a game. So, and the other one I gave you with the under being 14-4 is actually since the start of 2016 calendar year. So that includes the playoffs in 16. So just want to get that straight for people that might be fact checking here.
Exactly.
But,
we appreciate our fact checkers.
We absolutely do. But anyway you slice it, the trends and I think the logic to this game feels like it's just under the total.
Yeah, and obviously Ben Roethlisberger's home versus road splits are well documented, and actually his road splits are even worse when it's early 1 p.m. games versus primetime games, which I think is interesting. Yeah. And also...
You're not suggesting Ben parties to We're not suggesting that.
No. And then, like you were saying, like with Burfict, and then so Vontae's Burfict, and then their other star linebacker, Preston Brown, he missed a couple games, and the Bengals, especially against defending the running backs and throws over the middle, they were just gashed. But then last week, they were both back against the Dolphins, and they only gave up one offensive touchdown, and the other one was a special teams punt return for a touchdown. And then just looking at the Bengals offense, and it was explosive in the first couple weeks, but Tyler Eifert's injured. And then you have A.J. Green going up against Joe Hayden, and Joe Hayden absolutely blanketed Julio Jones last week. So I'm thinking a lot of Tyler Boyd, a lot of Joe Mixon, but is that really enough for like 3 touchdowns?
I think it's enough to move the football, but it's not enough to get the kind of big plays that end up sinking you if you're going under a total.
That's why I added Randy Bullock to my fantasy team this week. I'm expecting a lot of field goals from the Bengals offense. And then
every angle, I love it. Yep. This guy's got every angle.
And then the last game, this is another hold your nose play. We're taking the 49ers plus 9.5 in primetime against Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau. And I just think the Packers are not that great this year. This is a lot of points. And I know 49ers without Jimmy Garoppolo, with C.J. Beathard, they just lost to the Cardinals. I think that this line is an overreaction and it should not be higher than 7 points.
I'm with you on this, and I'm still of the belief that from player 2 to 53 on the roster, the Packers are a bottom 10 team. And I know that sounds ridiculous, and people are going to argue with that, but that's how good Aaron Rodgers is. That's how valuable he is. However, I think you have an underrated defense here with San Francisco, and you look at the kind of things they've done, and I know you're going to look. Some people are going to look on the surface and be like, "Well, they just gave up 28 points to the Cardinals." Well, yeah, there was a scoop and score at the end of that game.
Five turnovers overall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I just feel like Shanahan's going to go in there with a more conservative game plan, and I think something more along the lines of what we saw against the Chargers. It was almost like because they knew they had to stick close and were kind of out-talented, if you will, in that Chargers game. I think that's going to be a similar approach, whereas in the Cardinals game, I think they felt like, or at least it seemed like they approached that game as if they have better talent, and they were
favored. They were favored for a reason. But no, a couple notes on that. So 49ers defense, I agree with you, underrated. So they are 6th in yards per play allowed in both passing and rushing. And the reason why they've been a little unlucky, they're dead last in takeaways. And takeaways are not the most reliable stat to judge defenses on because...
Can I just interject here? And they have played quality competition. Yeah. It's not like we were talking about, and it wasn't on this, we were talking about where the Redskins going the last week had played against weak competition, and that's what skewed their numbers. I mean, San Francisco has already had to go into Kansas City. I mean, I know they just played the Cardinals, but that Lions team can move the football. Chargers. They had to play against them. The Chargers can move the football.
And the Vikings.
And look at what the Vikings have done since then, offensively. And, so I think that those
besides
numbers...
Besides the Buffalo game, of course.
Besides the Buffalo game. I didn't even know that happened. We've cast that one aside. But, no, seriously, I think that when you look, those numbers are impressive. And when you go beneath those numbers, if you want to call them the adjusted numbers, would be even better, even more impressive because of the competition they faced.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. And totally fine. Very valid interjection. And then, so besides you arguing that the Packers have a bottom 10 roster besides Rodgers, I just think the coaching staff also is a disaster. And the Packers so far this season, they have a negative 5.8 point differential in the first quarter, which is dead last, and then negative 6.6 point differential in the first half, which is fourth worst. And that tells me that Mike McCarthy and his coaching staff, they're not really prepping these teams or his team as well as other coaches are, whereas Kyle Shanahan is one of the best coaches in the NFL, I think. So just going back to that Chargers game, I think it's like a similar kind of logic to Kyle Shanahan versus Anthony Lynn, where the 49ers were able to keep it competitive. I mean, they built a 17-point lead in the first half, and then the Chargers only won by 2. And then the other thing, beware of big favorites in primetime games, because favorites of 9 or more points since 2003, 46, 61, and 2 against the spread, 43%. And that's really just, especially on the Sunday night game, or Monday night game like this one is, bettors are just, the public's trying to catch up from potential losses, and so they go big on these big favorites, and these prices are inflated, whereas the underdog, especially here, is the better play.
Right. Of course, the public that watches this isn't trying to catch up. They're just trying to use the house money to double it up.
And admittedly, this bet, it's a hold your nose play. It's always tough. Aaron Rodgers versus CJ Beathard, that alone will scare anyone, but the numbers just don't match up. And I think that 9.5 is a nice amount of points to take.
And I just don't think that this 49ers team is the type of team where they're at. I know they lost their quarterback, but I think they're well coached. I think they're well disciplined. I think they've gotten some solid players in there. They're not the type of team that if they get down by 14 points, they're going to pack it in. Like we've seen on certain occasions. And, I'm not really trying to point at the Redskins, but I think that's so fresh in a lot of people's minds where it's like, the Packers going to get up and then they're just going to... I don't think that the 49ers are going to be that type of team that just... they're going to be better prepared. They're not going to let the Packers completely roll over them.
Yeah, and especially against an underrated defense, it could be tough for Rodgers. So anyway, to recap our 5 best bets, we're going with 2 home underdogs. Titans +3 against the Ravens. Dolphins +3.5 against the Bears. The other underdog we're going with is 49ers +9.5 at the Packers. And then our 2 total bets, Seahawks, Raiders over 48 points in London, and Steelers, Bengals under 52.5 points. And I like our 5 this week.
I do like it. I know this stuff.
This is a tricky week in terms of overall lines, but I think that...
I think because the lines were so challenging this week, I feel like we both did extra work this week.
Yeah.
I think we really dove deep into a lot of games, including games that we ended up having a hunch with, following down the path, and then just coming to the conclusion of like, you know what, there's just not enough of an angle there.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the fact that these are very unsexy type picks, and I think that that's where you find value. I mean, who's taking the Dolphins, the Titans, and the 49ers? We are.
Yeah, no, general rule of thumb for, I guess the sharps, the bets that you're uncomfortable placing are usually the smarter bets a lot of the time. Bets should not be easy.
So we were holding our nose on that Browns pick last week.
And thank you, Greg Joseph, for barely making that field goal in overtime. But anyway, I'm Max Meyer.
I'm Scott Gramling.
And we hope you join us next week, and good luck with your picks this weekend.
Have a profitable weekend, everybody.